Wow, we have such a great lineup for you this time. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for making us a part of your day, and it's great to be back here in the studio after our remote special yesterday. We know that female workers in the U.S. earn less than men doing the same work. The numbers over time, sadly, have been consistent. Women taking home, on average, about 79 cents for every dollar that a dude makes. What we don't know is why. Why don't employers compensate workers equally? And why is this long-standing practice still legal? In our Friday Focus on You this time, some insight and analysis. Workplace expert Mary Abbajay is president and co-founder of the Career Stone Group, part of our Friday Focus on You rotation. So great to have you here.
So great to be here. Happy tax day. Well, I guess it's Monday officially. We got a couple days.
The sooner we get it all behind us, the better, right?
I know, right? And you know, it has tax day. They always say you work until after April, you start to keep the money, April 15th. But same for pay equity day, which is April 12th for women. So women have to work until April 12th before they start earning as much as men.
And longer for women of color than for white women because the pay gap for them is even more pronounced.
Their pay gap is really horrible. So as you said, women make about 79 cents on the dollar. Latina women make about 50 cents on the dollar, 50 to 60, and African-American women about 65 cents on the dollar to white men.
You think about workplace issues all the time. You've studied it. It's what you do. Why is this the case? I mean, I remember the 70s, the Equal Rights Amendment, this issue sort of first emerging onto the national radar screen in an attempt to say, you know what, we're better than this. But here we are in 2016 talking about all the same stuff.
Yeah.
Given your knowledge of how workplaces function, why is this so?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Well, we have made some progress. I do want to say that. We've made some progress since the 60s, but the data shows that we've flatlined in our progress since about 2005. So we've made no real movement in the last decade. So there's a couple of reasons why this is going on. The experts call them explained phenomena and unexplained phenomena. So the unexplained phenomena is discrimination, is unconscious bias. Largely this is, we don't realize we're doing it. We do it. It's very rare now that someone's going to overtly say, well, she's a woman, I don't have to pay her as much. So these are things that are going on either consciously or subconsciously. That only makes up for about 33% of the pay gap. The other large percentage of the pay gap is made up of what they call explained phenomena, and this is really fascinating. This is about occupational and industry sorting of people by gender into different career paths, different career tracks, and different choices that are propelled by society where there is unequal pay. So it starts very early in our society, and there are forces that are just pushing people into different gender roles.
There's a temptation, I guess, in terms of us perceiving the world in a certain way and thinking, okay, well, this is how it is. Sometimes you look at a person and you say, you know what, he looks like a supervisor. He looks like a boss. He looks like someone we want to keep. And so therefore, when contract time comes or negotiation time over salary comes, we're going to go that extra mile because if we don't keep this guy happy, often a white male, the perception is he'll be lured away, we'll lose that talent, we'll have to go out onto the marketplace and take the unknown. So our perceptions of what leadership looks like or
absolutely
talent
that plays into it, and that is sometimes called unconscious bias. And what we think is unconsciously the white male is worth more, and that may be true in the real sense that more companies are thinking about white male as leaders. So whether it's true or not, that is a perception.
It's like the perception creating the reality.
Exactly. And so when you see, and that's one of the things that causes our pay gap. So if you look at the high paid positions in this world, doctors, CEOs, C-suites, those are predominantly men, right? You look at some of the lower paid industries or occupations, cashiers, nurses, things like that, those are predominantly women. Women hold 76% of those positions, where men hold 76% of the top positions in organizations. That absolutely plays into it, and our perceptions about what leadership looks like also plays into that.
So sometimes we have people at a certain level, sometimes in the same job, and the compensation levels are unequal for reasons that don't pass muster. In other words, not performance, not things you can point to. So-and-so brought in 4 accounts, the other so-and-so, some other person brought in 2. You can perceive a value difference. So we have people on the sort of lateral level on the organizational chart, different pay. The other issue is when a group of 5 there's an opening for a supervisor, and it's going to come from one of 5 people at the level below, and the man gets promoted into the job with the better pay. That contributes to these numbers as well.
That does. And the one thing that they do find, if you adjust for the same job in the same organization, the pay gap does go down quite significantly to about 6%. And some people say 6%, and that's not a big deal. 5 to 6% over a lifetime is a huge deal. If you're making $100,000 a year and you're paid 5% every year for 30%, that's $150,000. That's several college tuitions for state colleges. That's a house. It's a down payment. So that's still a problem. And the other thing that we see is the higher you raise, the more the disparity in terms of there's less women there. So it contributes to the overall. And you'll be glad or not glad to know that it gets worse with age. So the older the woman is, the bigger the pay disparity and the bigger pay gap is.
I read where the cumulative impact of this unequal pay situation that we have is $500 billion.
Oh, yeah.
So it's real for the individuals involved, whether it's thousands or into 5 figures.
Yeah.
And then you look at women as a whole, we're talking $500 billion.
Yeah.
And I think we're at a point now in our society where men don't say, yay, the playing field is stacked in our favor, good for me, because we all, guess what? We all have daughters, sisters, mothers, wives, and if they're not getting compensated at the level they should be, it hurts our family financial
What
situation.
also hurts the whole economic environment. If you're paying women less, there's less money going into the economy itself. So I mean, it's a problem that is more than just, oh, I'm not getting paid enough. It impacts the family, it impacts the economy, it impacts organizational life.
What do you advise women who suspect or know that they're not making what they should?
So there's a couple of things. We have to talk about strategies for organizations, and we have to talk about strategies for women. All right. So let's start with the women first, or anyone who is subject of pay disparity, because there are some industries actually where women get paid more than men. They tend to be lower scale industries like social work, sales, things like that. First of all, you need to know what you're worth in the market. So places like Glassdoor look to see what people are getting paid in your industry for your occupation, for your level of experience. So know what's being paid. You have to learn how to ask for a raise, and you also have to learn how to negotiate your job when you come in. So you've got to kind of take these skills in with you, and you've got to advocate for yourself.
What if you don't have those skills?
You got to get them. Come on, it's 2016. You can Google that stuff. You can learn. You can go to classes. You can learn on the internet. There's amazing tactics. You practice with people. You ask a mentor. It is up to you in your career to actually learn those skills.
Is it your sense that the moments where you can get a pay bump are few and far between? They're when you change jobs. They're at different times, and you have to be kind of savvy enough to know the timing and then have the skills that we're just referencing a second ago.
Absolutely. You have to be savvy. You got to know when to ask. You have to understand the culture of the organization. You have to have facts. You have to also deserve it. But there's things I want organizations to do as well that I want to talk about briefly if we can.
Please.
One is things that we're seeing is pay transparency is a key factor in eliminating this. Sunlight disinfects. So companies need to make it more transparent. Companies also need to get a more rigorous structure around how they're paying people. They might even consider using HR as a kind of reflection, like, well, why is this person getting paid this and that? And then another thing that they can often do is they can eliminate negotiation for entry-level jobs, because that's where the pay disparity starts. Because young men are much more liable to negotiate their first job pay than women, and that really adds up over time, because most of your jobs start after that first job, right? You keep going up and up. So those are a few things I want organizations to think about doing.
When you talk about transparency, I think most of us grow up that you don't talk about money. It's rude, it's not classy or whatever. But really, the secrecy enables the unfairness that we sometimes that is in our system.
Yeah, and we've talked about pay transparency on the show. There are more organizations that are making their pay transparent to everybody within the organization and outside the organization. And that's really both enlightening for the employees, but it's also enlightening for leadership. Because not often, so much of this leadership doesn't really realize they're doing. So the pay transparency can be a huge thing to closing the gender gap, pay gender gap, and the racial gender pay gap as well.
The ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, way back in the day, fell short. Is there some other legal challenge? Should the courts be striking this down? Should governments, for example, say, you're not eligible, sort of change the, the presumption, and say, you can't win a federal contract unless you prove you're paying people independent of gender.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. I mean, I think the Lilly Ledbetter Act is really bringing it to public forefront. I think government can do it. Government's a huge spender. I think they can do more. And I think some social policies to encourage women to go into traditionally male-dominated roles and occupations can be really beneficial, because that's, again, one of the major causes of pay disparity.
Mary Abbajay of the Career Stone Group, a great part of our Friday Focus on You rotation. Always great having you here. Thank you so much for your time this time. Mary, we'll see you next month.
See you next month.
Have a great weekend. Up next, victory for the Caps in Game 1 of their Stanley Cup playoff series with the Flyers. Tom Threlkeld has that and more as we continue.